go. Cool. So digging in, AI, big, bright lights, letters. It's, the speeding silver bullet that's going to solve everything. And a bit like a really awkward James Bond intro, that's not quite how we think. So we've been guilty of this, I'm sure, as the innovation team. We've been very excited about AI. And certainly others have been doing some very big promises about what AI can do. And I guess I want to put right up front that AI doesn't change the rules about how innovation works around how we think about product and how we think about design, but it can augment it. It can enable us to do some really exciting things. So over the next 35 minutes, we're going to be covering a few things. I'll be talking about the philosophy behind how we've ended up with this one-day sprint idea. Andy's going to be going through the no hat, no entry, the mystical challenge coin. I'll then be taking back to take us through the rhythm of what a one-day sprint could look like for you and your team. And then Andy will be talking about how AI can be enablers, and we'll be going backwards and forwards with a few examples of what we've been doing with some projects using one-day sprints. So without further ado, the philosophy. So we're not the first people to think about this, right? Jake Knapp famously popularized the Google Ventures sprint, which lasted a week, and tries to go through an iterative process to get to a live product. People like Alex Osterwalder, who I'm always worried I'm mispronouncing his surname, at Strategizer came up with value proposition canvas. There's the business model canvas, lots of other concepts where people are working in daily processes to bring real value to their users, to their end customers. And so this is the basis of our first principle. Our first principle is thinking in small pieces, so thinking in atoms, building slowly, building with small bits to create real value over a period of time as we add them all together. That's really important. It's the principles behind lean, agile, and lots of other frameworks that everyone else uses in the world. Talking of lean takes us to principle number 2, which is to work with lean loops. This isn't something that we've come up with. Again, we're taking this from Eric Ries, who in the early 2000s started talking about how startups could move more quickly and reduce the amount of waste by taking a process of identifying a challenge. He talked about them being a problem, but a challenge, coming up with ideas that could solve that challenge, building them, measuring how those ideas worked in real life, and then through those measurements, learning and bringing that background into a new problem. And the quicker that you can do this flywheel, the better you can create a product, a service, or efficiency for real humans trying to solve real problems in the world. And that's our second principle, is working always in lean loops. Oh, it's not moving. Third principle, and this comes from the startup I was running before I rejoined Torchbox. So I was working at an AI-based startup looking at health and fitness, specifically running. And the thing to understand about running is after you've been for a run, you feel awful, right? You are less strong, you're less resilient than when you started the run. You have burnt your energy, and you need a time to recover. You need to recover from that run. And then the magic happens because you become more resilient. Your body's like, this idiot is trying to destroy us. We're going to need to build some more muscle. We're going to need to build some coping strategies in our mind to handle all of this running. And this is a similar thing to when we're working in businesses. If we do nothing in business, we just bimble along, our performance doesn't change. It just remains a horizontal line. So some bright person like myself might pop up and be like, let's do a sprint. Sprint's going to be amazing. And it will be amazing. But once you've done the sprint, you'll be knackered. As a team, you'll be tired. You'll have a whole bunch of confirmation bias because you're tired. And that's what happens when you're tired. You think all your ideas are amazing. And there's been no reflection time. You have no idea whether what you've produced is good or whether it's bad. And so the trick here is that you need incubation. You need to rest. Incubation is just a slightly pretentious design innovation word to articulate stress, and you will increase your performance. And with that, we want to have the next sprint when you have increased the performance of the team and onwards and upwards, so that you're always moving forwards. And our third principle is to deliberately arrange the sprints in a cadence that enables this performance. So we think the maximum number of sprints you should be doing in a week is 3, possibly even 2. So Tuesday and Thursday or Monday, Wednesday and Friday are the absolute max that you could think about doing, because that gives some time for incubation, talking to internal stakeholders to figure out whether you're moving in the right direction. Recap before I hand over to Andy: build using atoms, work around lean loops, and incubate to get superpowers. And with that, I'll hand across about the hats.
Thanks very much, Ed. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who should be involved in a one-day sprint. And this is where our hats rules come in. Bear with me, I'll explain in a minute. So let's consider our innovation team as an example. We'd normally have 3 people at most on a team, but more often than not, it might just be the 2 of us. It really does depend on the challenge. But within that team, there's a lot of skills that are needed for innovation, and that's no different for a one-day sprint. So we'd need everything from being able to visual ideas to quickly mock up a UI, being able to facilitate sessions to get the best out of those in it, teasing out information quite quickly, but ensuring that the people that are involved don't feel overwhelmed. You need to be able to quickly research new topics and make sense of them, prompt and converse with AI systems effectively, knowing their limitations and capabilities. And we also need knowledge of creative low-cost strategies or growth hacking. In a digital world specifically, we need to understand the principles of effective interaction design. We need to understand the mechanisms of how marketing works. Obviously, we need to understand innovation and the principles of experimentation, as well as those of kind of account management. And last but not least, we need to understand kind of organizational or business strategy. So the goals, missions, and vision of an organization, as well as the ability to develop a plan of action to effectively allocate resources and execute on that mission. So that's a lot of hats. And we can't have a 50-person team. That would cost not only a small fortune, but it would slow things down hugely. So innovators are often T-shaped generalists or polymaths. So the team needs to be able to wear multiple different hats and switch between these depending on the task or challenge at hand. There's one hat that no one on the innovation team should or can wear. And a spoiler alert, it's not a witch or a wizard hat. That's the client hat. This needs to be a specific role. There needs to be a clear individual or group that the innovation team is delivering that work to. That client or group of people is responsible for validating the work and ensuring there's kind of clear direction. Many different people can wear that hat. That can be the client, can wear the client hat. That could be internal stakeholders, that might be donors, and that might be service users or others. But whoever is wearing that hat needs to be able to provide clear guidance and direction throughout the challenge. So the client's in the center of obviously a one-day sprint, and we'll be providing clear direction at multiple different intervals, which Ed will talk about in a moment. But the innovation team is doing the heavy lifting in the background. And we estimate that the client should be spending about 10 to 20% of that time with the innovation team. And the innovation team needs to be doing all of the heavy lifting outside of that. So now I'm going to jump in a little bit into the challenge coin as the price, it's kind of the price of entry. So now we know who and what hats we might need. We need to understand what the price of entry is, or what we actually need to start a one-day sprint. And this is where the challenge coin comes in. So you've probably heard or seen this phrase a million times. And in many cases, it's great, right? So don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. But actually for a one-day sprint, we want to flip that. We actually want problems to explore solutions for, or opportunities. They might sound like the kind of two sides of the same coin, but they are slightly nuanced. Whether it's a problem or an opportunity, that presents the motivations behind why we need innovation, and they provide context for the innovation process. So resolving a problem often results in returning to a normal state or removing an obstacle to get to a desired state. That might be an issue, a challenge, a pain point that needs to be addressed. But problems are often known and are definitely a catalyst for innovation. Opportunities, on the other hand, refers to a circumstance or a potential scenario that provides a chance for progress or advancement. So capitalizing on an opportunity could lead to surpassing a current state or reaching new levels of success or performance. There might not be a problem per se, so it's not necessarily about fixing something that's not working, but rather about going beyond where you are today. Opportunities are often assumed, whereas problems are known. So let's look at a couple of examples. So problems are barriers, pains, and blockers. That might be things like a slow or a complex process or an operational inefficiency. That could be anything like a volunteer shortage for a charity or a non-profit. It could be a donor or a customer pain point or tension that they're experiencing today, prohibiting them from giving. Whereas opportunities, on the other hand, might be things like a new technology, something like AI or large language models. We might not know exactly what the problem it might solve is, but it could allow us to propel us forward. Another one might be something like a social media trends that we spotted and realized this might be a way for us to unlock new donors and revenue streams. Or it might just be something as simple as a gap in a market and unlocking and exploring a new area that we aren't playing today that could have a huge impact for us. No matter whether it's a problem or an opportunity, you can start a one-day sprint with either. So now we know who and what is needed. What's the goal of a one-day sprint? So the goal of a one-day sprint is to learn as fast as possible in order to kind of validate or invalidate hypotheses. And by hypotheses, I mean a belief or an assumption that is actually testable, whether that's something, whether this is actually really a problem, whether the solution's the right fit for that solution, that problem, or there is actually value from the solution. That allows us to stay lean, ensure we're going in the right direction. We can change direction quickly, so we can pivot, park, or progress. We can test and invalidate those assumptions, which allows us to reduce risk as we're going. And then finally, ensure that we're staying deeply focused on the actual needs of the people that we're designing for. We call that validated learning. And that's basically the process of testing these hypotheses, learning, and then those learnings informing future decisions. That's exactly what Ed was referring to earlier in regards to the lean loop. And the unit of value in all of this in a one-day sprint is about tangible progress. And that looks completely different depending on the challenge. That might be a working prototype, a new service blueprint, a visual, a strategy or tactics, a new value proposition. But the ambition is to have something that's tangible, a thing that we can use, discuss, and experiment with. So I'm now going to pass across to Ed, who's going to talk a little bit about a rhythm.
Oh, I wouldn't be a Zoom call if there wasn't a problem with unmuting yourself. Cool, great stuff. So rhythm of the day. The rhythm of the day. So to give a quick overview of what we're looking at, there's a bit of work up front before the day starts. There are 5 elements to the day itself, and then there are experiments that come afterwards. So cheating ever so slightly, but the one-day sprint is the main bulk in the middle. I'm going to start with the survey though, because the survey is really important. As Andy and I have been talking about, this needs to be challenged first. We need to be sure that we're working with a problem or an opportunity and understand what that looks like. And the way we do that is real simple. The way that you could do that is really simple, and it's just doing a pre-survey. Surveys are really helpful because they help frame the mind of the client and they help frame the mind of the innovation team around what that challenge might look like. And so problems and opportunities are subtly different from one another. Surveys are great because you can funnel people in different directions, right? If someone says this is a problem, you can ask them specific questions. If someone says it's an opportunity where it's, literally raining money on them, you can ask different questions. So how we've been working around this from our experiments that we think you could take on is thinking about the problem category. So are we losing money? Is there a time suck somewhere? Is there just real bad vibes in the culture of the team? Is the product breaking, right? Bad stuff happening generically. And then what type of problem are we looking at? Again, the framework we've been using is the Cynefin framework, which is literally the only Welsh word I know, and it's not spelt the way that it sounds. So we'll share it in the email afterwards. But the Cynefin framework is really helpful as a frame, figuring out, is this clear? It's just a known, simple to do. Someone just needs to crack on and do it. Complicated. Are we trying to get a rocket to the moon? It's really hard, but gravity remains the same, thrust remains the same. We know stuff. It's just about bringing the team together. Is it complex? It's like driving a car where you've got to be continually changing what you're doing all the time, but the individual pieces are relatively simple. Or is it chaos where it's just real bad vibes and you should get out as quickly as you can do? On the opportunity side, very similar to the category, but it's about enhancement, right? It's about potential gains in impact. It's about saving time. It's about making the product even more delightful. And there, it's figuring out what the type is. Is it a service? Is it a product? Is it efficiency? To start framing both the client's view of the world and the innovation team's view. What's also helpful here is where there is disagreement within the client. The team that is wearing the client hat may not all agree. 3 people of the group may think it's a problem and 2 think it's an opportunity. That's a really interesting thing to then be able to dig into later within the one-day sprint. So cool. In the survey, we found that it's really helpful to then converge into who is this for? Is this for the person wearing the client hat? Is it for the team that is wearing the client hat? Does the person wearing the client hat have a client themselves that they need to interface with? Is it for a large group of people? Is it for non-humans, right? It could be that this is for the natural world. Could be the entire world. I think if it is for the entire world, maybe the one-day sprint is not the place to be looking at solving that challenge, which I'll get to later. How many people are we talking about? Are we talking about one single individual? Or are we talking about so many people that I couldn't be bothered to draw them all and just drew 5? But imagine that's thousands and thousands of people. How painful is this? Is it, a matchstick that has actually it's gone out and all that's left is a little bit of smoke, or is it a raging forest fire? And how often is this happening? Is this happening all the time? Or is this like, literally it's a 5-minute thing once in a blue moon and actually probably not a big deal? And then how big does the client team believe this problem to be? Is this something that they really think could be solved in a single day? Or is this something like building the pyramids at Giza? This is going to take forever. Very often in our experience, we found that folks wearing the client hat, because this is a problem that's very live to them, they overestimate how big it is, how big the problem is, because they've not been able to solve it within the systems they're working on. But it's a really interesting question to start framing the resources required for the day itself. So cool. Survey allows us to better understand the challenge, and that's both for the client and for you in the innovation team. The day itself starts by unpacking the challenge, and the best way we've found to unpack the challenge is using a lightning decision jam. So this is AJ and Smart who came up with this. We've modified it to fit the needs of the day and how we think you could take it to use it. So start with the challenge, and if everyone has said this is an opportunity, or everyone said it's a problem, it becomes easier because it's then the problems or the opportunities. So everyone puts down their post-it. So challenge could be, how do we communicate this one day sprint idea that we've been coming up with? Lots of stuff around that. We vote on what the biggest challenge is. We create a hierarchy around that so that we can see visually which is the most important challenge for everybody in the group. And that allows us to move on to the how might we's. How might we's are a really useful bridge from a problem or an opportunity to start thinking about solutions. So this is just getting down, how might we start talking about one-day sprints? How might we communicate with people outside to then help frame the ideas that we can use to move us forward? Again, putting down the ideas, it's quantity over quality, voting on them, creating the hierarchy so we can see what's important within there. That then comes quickly into the effort matrix, which is at the top, high impact, at the bottom, low impact. On the left, it's difficult to do. On the right, it's easy to do, using the wrong words, but it doesn't really matter. The trick is you want the thing to be in the top right-hand corner, right? That's the quadrant that's always important in this. And this is interesting. What we have found from the work that we've been doing, that the highest voted post-it might not be the one that logically fits in the top right-hand corner. And it's the one in the top right-hand corner that should progress into the day itself. And that then leads into the final bit of the lightning decision jam, which is questions and actions. So what are we taking forwards, and what open questions or things that need to be parked in the car park need to go down? Super simple, post-its with the action at the top, and then any open questions going along the bottom, which leads seamlessly into the slide that I keep forgetting that is there, which is synthesizing what I've just talked about. But we're trying to prioritize impact versus effort. That's the whole purpose of the unpacking the challenge. It's taking the information that was in the survey, both in the innovation team's mind and the client's mind, and getting it down where everyone can collectively look at it. We're then into the building, designing, thinking, and learning bit of the morning, which looks neat and tidy here, but is not neat and tidy in real life. Anyone who's experienced working in sprints before will know that trying to figure out work is squiggly. Importantly, though, these lines aren't crossing one another. From our experience, we've seen that the communication cost of trying to interact with one another as team members between the check-ins isn't worth the payoff. So if someone is wearing kind of builder type hats, and that might be as a developer, it might be as an interaction designer, whatever it is, they're working alone. And the person that's got the thinking type cap, strategies, business world on them, they're working alone. So it's working together alone, and we converge then with the client in the check-in. So we're trying to unpack the challenge. We're trying to understand ourselves what the challenge is within this one-day sprint. We're looking at solutions. And importantly, as an innovation team, what you're trying to do is get to something tangible by the lunchtime deadline, or that midday deadline, so that you can start playing it back to the people wearing the client hat. So that check-in, it's a demo, right? You've got your slightly awkward demo tape, and you're going to play it, and you are going to communicate the thinking and try and capture builds. Now, this is a real low fidelity way, because there's only been 2, maximum 3 hours of work at this point. So low fidelity questions of asking the client, does this take us closer to answering the challenge? What should we build on? What have we misunderstood about the challenge? Which gives the client the space to interact, intervene, pull people back onto course, and it allows the innovation team to test sentiment pretty quickly, right? Part of the lean loop is understanding viability, desirability, and the other one, Andy, desirability, viability. Feasibility.
There you go.
The cat has got my tongue. Feasibility, 3 lenses of innovation. There we go. It hasn't changed the rules. And it allows them to intervene around those. Afternoon, very similar to the morning, squiggly lines. There may be fewer people at this point because people have dropped out of the sprint team. The important piece here is to finish, right? The one-day sprint is creating work that is facilitating communication. It is trying to understand how to push a challenge forwards, ready for that retrospective in the afternoon. Talking of which, the retrospective is where the progress is shared back and next steps are defined for experimentation. And the experimentation piece is a little bit out of scope of this webinar, because we would run out of time. I mean, I'm already worried we're going to run out of time anyway. The experiments are vital, though. Going back to the lean loop, a one-day sprint can handle the challenge and can handle the ideas that relate to the challenge. There just isn't enough time in a day from our experience to legitimately measure them. You need a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year sometimes to actually be able to measure pieces, but you certainly can't do it in the few hours that you have for the day. So the experiments are really important, whether that's A/B testing, as this image implies here, or any of the other myriad innovation tests that you could use. And again, using those lenses of desirability, viability, and feasibility, and strategic fit for the organization to invalidate or validate the idea and whether it moves it forwards. Each loop is creating value. That's the purpose of it. The purpose of each day sprint is to create value, even if that value is to validate that we have hit a dead end, that, you know, the taking the right there looked like a great idea, but actually was not. We need to take a left, and it's helping us move forwards. I hand across to Andy for the AI stuff.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Ed. So we've talked a little bit up front about how AI might actually help accelerate this process. So we'd like to just talk a little bit about AI's role in this. So AI is a broad brushstroke. What we actually mean is generative AI, and that's what's allowing us to accelerate much of this process. So generative AI is the system in which we can create a wide variety of data, such as images, videos, audio, text, code from a prompt. So that's tools like ChatGPT, Bing AI, Anthropic's Claude, and things like Midjourney and Adobe Firefly. It's less about the tools themselves, but how we might actually use these to accelerate innovation. And we'll cover a couple of those in a moment. So the first is that these tools enable us to build and make faster, so we can create those tangible working artifacts a lot quicker. We can bring ideas to life quicker, whether that's through written or visual means, so stories, visuals, storyboard, wireframes, that type of thing. We can look at problems from different perspectives and through new lenses. These tools help us to break out of our rivers of thinking, or the way that we always think about something. They allow us to do things like root cause analysis, how might we springboards, and we can even get them to act like specific people to help us inform ideation. These tools really help us to bring simplicity to complexity, so both understanding complex subjects and ways to communicate them as well. LLMs are great at data analysis and sense making, providing we put the right measures in place, but there are definitely ways to do this. You can also embody the technology, and by that I mean leverage the power of something like a large language model to create a new product or service, or the desired value in completely new ways. Through critical analysis, so we can use these models to analyze solutions and strategies from multiple different perspectives, help with identifying things like unintended consequences and content analysis. And then finally, it's a tool that really helps us to enhance creativity, everything from generating ideas to creative writing to combinational thinking. So that's quite abstract. So let's make those a little bit more concrete. And I'm going to pass to Ed to talk a little bit about how we can use these for building.
Perfect. So let's talk about one-day building with an actual example. So Andy mentioned their root cause analysis, and one of the projects we worked on relatively recently was a root cause analysis tool. We realized within that Lightning Decision Jam that it was going to need to be a web artifact, so we needed a website. Showed up to GPT-4, can I have a website? And more or less, it's given me exactly what I've requested there in the prompt. You probably can't read it, but you can pause the video later. The only bit that it screws up is the button at the bottom. So hour 0, more or less, I'm going to put hour 1 here, but hour 0 got a working web app that can move us forwards. By hour 2, I was able to validate that we could download a report. And this was interesting because I needed to validate pretty quickly that I could take HTML syntax, so italics, bolds, underlines, bullet points, and get the same formatting within a PDF, because ultimately the root cause analysis, the end product was a report that needed to be sent out. So for the lunchtime retro, the lunchtime check-in, I could say, cool, we've got a website, we've got the PDF, this is going in the right direction. Human in client hat, or humans in client hat, does this meet your specifications? Are we heading in the right direction? Does it help answer the challenge? They say yes, which is cool, because then I was able to move us forward to start interfacing directly with GPT-4. So the hypothesis at the beginning of the day had been that we could put unstructured data that was in Slack, so basically Slack conversations between engineers trying to figure out a problem, and that GPT-4 could bring that together and synthesize that into something sensible that could be delivered either to a client or to other engineers to explain what had happened and recommendations, all the rest of it. Hour 5, the end of the day, was validating, can we get what's in that PDF into Google Sheets? Because actually, weirdly, it's not Google Sheets, Google Docs, where the final report needs to be, and it needs to be styled in the style that we expect there. And the great thing was that after 5 hours of work, we have a working web application that's interfacing with GPT-4. GPT-4 is fulfilling our hypothesis, as we believed, at giving back useful information, and we're able to get that into a Google Doc. And this is really cool because it gets over that blank sheet problem, right? So root cause analysis becomes a much easier process for developers, which means they can actually focus on the value of thinking about how they solve the problem and deliver more value to clients. I hand to Andy. I keep forgetting about these data. This might feel a bit abstract, right? But it's in terms of, okay, well, how does that apply to me in a non-profit? But it's not, because it's doing what large language models are very, very good at, which is taking unstructured data, making sense of that data, and then allowing that data to be used for action, right? It's taking us really quickly within a day on that journey. I hand to Andy to talk about the thinking.
Thank you. Cheers, Ed. So these tools can also help us with kind of our design innovation thinking in many different ways. I'm just going to take you through 2 examples. So the first is we obviously need to understand who we're designing for and what their pains and gains might be, or the jobs that they're trying to do. This is an example of a prompt for GPT-4 exploring exactly that. So we were able to very quickly identify a number of different functional, emotional, and societal jobs that someone might actually be experiencing and that we would need to design for. The next is that we've given context on our challenge and asked what a best-in-class incident reporting process might look like. So GPT-4 was able to help us with breaking down what a process might look like, and it did a really good job of that. Of course, we shouldn't rely fully on GPT-4 to do that, but this again allowed us to explore something without having a completely blank piece of paper. And we built on this, and by lunchtime we were able to by midday even, we were able to have a check-in and share a revised service blueprint to get feedback, build, mitigating and eliminating any potential risks with the client. And that allowed us to focus on elements of getting feedback as well and building that further to the end of the day. By the end of the sprint as well, we were able to use all of that input and build what a customer experience might look like for reporting an incident. And obviously this ladders back up to the root cause analysis, so the actual problem of the process itself. Ed, I'm going to pass back to you about building again and what to expect from those 5 days.
Cool. So one of the questions that we often get, and actually I'm realizing that maybe we should have put it further up, is that 1-day sprints aren't an end in themselves, right? 1-day sprints are, as we had in that second principle, they're building towards how we can enhance team performance. So we've been working on RNIB, which is a really good example of how we've used multiple individual days to build something valuable. So what RNIB wanted to produce was an internal tool that would allow internal knowledge to be synthesized for the helpline staff, which is, a really awesome thing to do. And within 5 days, we were able to get to this interface. So day 1 was really boring. I mean, visually really boring at any rate. And I have to admit, because I'm worried that there might be an actual developer on the phone call, this is just the Next.js server running. Like, I didn't have the forethought to take a screenshot of the interaction with OpenAI. But what we were doing was figuring out, could the internal knowledge that RNIB had, could that be embedded into a vector database that then a large language model could interface with? And by the end of day 1, we could tick that off and say, yes, this is feasible. We can do this, which allowed us to get to day 2, where the magic started to happen, which was we could put in a prompt about sight loss, about anything to do with blindness that related to RNIB, and we would get a 100-word response back from OpenAI's API. Day 3 then we realized that we needed to protect the prompt. So, and this is where incubation is really important, because we wouldn't have found this otherwise. We were basically just mucking around, seeing what would happen if we put in dumb prompts. So I was asking about penguins, and unfortunately, OpenAI would respond with a plausible response, which made us realize that, well, okay, actually it's very good at hallucinating, and we need to protect the prompts against malicious interactions. And in addition, we need to put the sources. Where is it that the large language model has taken this information from, so that the helpline staff can be confident they're looking at the right thing? And if they need to drill down in more detail, they can go and drill down in more detail by following the link. Day 4 was to style it in the way that actually RNIB requires. RNIB, for very good reason, has big accessibility requirements to make sure that all their internal tools meet the conditions that mean that all their staff can interact with it. And day 5 was creating a feedback loop. So up to that point, we had no way of gathering, were we getting helpful responses or unhelpful responses from the large language model? And again, we could really quickly build something, a little Next.js app, which is talking to a Google Sheet, so that we can all see, okay, what's the prompt that was put in, what was the response from the large language model, and then any comment that the helpline staff wanted to add. And this is great. It allowed us to experiment with experienced helpline team, junior helpline people, and really validate that we were creating something of value for RNIB and their internal team. We have quite a few more slides around how AI hasn't changed the game, but we have pretty much run out of time, I think, if we're going to take any questions. I'm gonna quickly talk about the lenses around.
You're okay, Ed. I think we're all right. We'll still have like 10 minutes at the end, so, and we haven't got loads of questions coming yet, so I think you're okay.
Okay, I will stop worrying about time then. I will quickly do the lenses and then hand over to Andy, who can talk about them in more detail. So broadly, I've mentioned these before: desirability, do people care? Feasibility, can we do this? Viability, is it going to have an impact and make money? And then does it hit the strategic need of the organization to move forwards? And obviously the innovation sweet spot is in the middle of that Venn diagram. But I will hand to Andy, who can give us a bit more detail about each of these.
Thanks, Ed. So I'll just unpack these a little bit more and kind of explain some of the questions that we'll be asking at each stage. So desirability is number one. We always start there. So is the solution fundamentally creating value for people that we're designing for? And do people actually want it? So the type of questions that we ask here are things like, is there a real problem? Is that problem painful enough? Or is the desired outcome worth us focusing our efforts on? How important is that really for them? Does our solution actually solve that problem? Does it create value in new, meaningful ways? And is our solution delightful? Does it solve that problem effectively? And then is it better than what exists today? Like what they are currently using or doing? And will the pull of our new solution be enough to get them to want to use it? Feasibility is all around, is this actually even possible for us to do it? So can we do it? And here we're asking, can we do it technically within the time frame that we've kind of set up? Is the technology needed to power the kind of solution available to us and within reach? Can we do it operationally? So can the organization actually make it happen? Do we have the resources? And then finally, can we do it regulatory? So within current legal or regulatory boundaries, and what might be the constraints, and can we overcome them? Viability is all around, should we do it? So this is things like, will people pay for it? Does it make financial sense? Is it sustainable? Will it bring in revenues? What's the pricing model? Is the effort worth the payoff? How will we fund it? Is there budget? Can we actually afford to do this? Where's the money going to come from? And then finally, does it align with our kind of internal goals? So team goals, organizational goals. And if it's disruptive and it's something completely new, what are the opportunity costs of focusing here? And then finally is for good. So does it align with our organization's values? Does it really result in a positive impact for society or the environment? And this is around, does it align with our organization's mission, vision, and values? Is it safe to launch? Have we thought about the risks, the unintended consequences? Have we mitigated those risks? And finally, do the benefits outweigh the cost? So those are the lenses that we'll always be applying through the innovation process, but it's important that we don't forget these, and they're still at the very core of what we're trying to do. Ed, back to you.
Nice. So thanks, Andy. I think Lisa actually came up with this phrase, so credit her. The one-day sprint isn't changing the world. One of the reasons why I don't think if someone pops up saying the challenge is about solving world peace or something, it's probably not a good fit for one-day sprint. It's about fixing a problem, right? And it needs to be through those lenses. Flicking back a slide, it's fixing a problem. And so that means one-day sprints, or a series of one-day sprints, they're good for creating momentum. There is always the tension within any organization, but it seems to be that within our world of nonprofits and charities, we have a tendency to talk in circles sometimes. A one-day sprint is really good for creating momentum because it's not a huge risk, right? You're losing a day if you're working on it and it doesn't quite go in the direction you want it to go, but you'll learn by doing it. The mere fact that you've taken the jump as a innovation team or as a team to start doing something means that you're going to learn about it, and it forces you to break things into smaller pieces. There's no way that you can approach a single day with a big monolith of work. On the flip side, that it means it's bad for other stuff. It's bad for big things, right? Big complex challenges like getting that rocket to the moon would not work with a one-day sprint because known knowns that are complex require structured thinking and deep understanding of the problem, which one-day sprints can't approach. So one-day sprints are really good for, I've realized that I have messed up with the word. They're not good for complicated challenges. They are good for complex challenges. I'm not sure why I hadn't fixed that before this. So they're not good for getting a rocket to the moon. They are good for driving cars, though, where small changes, different directions are required. One-day sprints are your friend. This, it will come as no surprise to anybody on this phone call, is something that we can support you with if you're interested. I should say before I go into the sales pitch, we're actually as interested in supporting people doing this themselves as we are working. We love working with other people, right? But we're really interested in people that are wanting to take on one-day sprints themselves and run it themselves with their teams as a micro innovation function at their charity. So if you are interested just in that side of stuff, book in something on Calendly and we'd love to talk with you. But if you do want to work with us, one-day sprints is obviously part of our acceleration work. We also have strategy and culture. Strategy is figuring out, okay, well, in this new era of artificial intelligence, how on earth do we need to reorganize our organizations? What's the system that we're part of? What's the value network that we are engaging with? How do we make the most impact for our end users, for our donors, for our team? Culture is more around individual contributors. So how do we take these new tools and embed them in our day-to-day experience? And how do we accelerate the work that we're doing through large language models? We have a bunch of resources on our website. So ai.torchbox.com, if you've not already come across it. Some of the projects we've been working on, some of the thinking that we've been writing about, and then resources just around large language models specifically and AI generally. And that's everything. Are there any questions?
Yes, we do. Thank you. You see, we didn't run out of time. We were fine.
We didn't. I was worrying about how.
So we've got a good question from Mary at Friends of the Earth. Have you used AI to embody any of the hats in your sprint team, including the client? If so, what worked and what hasn't?
That's interesting. And it feels like, it feels like you've done more of this than in terms of, I feel like there are some hats you've used.
Yeah, I'd never use it for the client hat per se, because I think that information sits with the client fundamentally, and it is about their organization and the way that these models work. They won't have that kind of expert knowledge per se. You could use it to stress test though, so act as a specific person to be able to get a potential point of view. When it comes to some of the hats, you can certainly use these models to help inform things like growth strategy, and particularly around those different lenses. So we can certainly use these models to inform and inspire us to do that. Does that answer your question? Hopefully, Mary.
I think to build on that, I think I just thinking about the interaction design developer hats that are there. I was in a one-day sprint on Monday where I was using a large language model to basically just very quickly move between those hats. So it was facilitating me doing work that I suppose I potentially knew, but it would have taken me a week to do had I not had that enablement from the large language model to be like, you can do this script in Photoshop and that will help you process images in this way. And then that way we can get it more quickly into, the server to do these things. And, I think that's where it's really helpful. So less replacing the hats, more allowing us to put the hats on and off more quickly, perhaps. It's that cycle time piece.
Yeah, and to build on that as well, you need to know what you're asking a large language model as well, right? So you need that expertise and also to be able to go, actually, is this right in terms of the response that I've got? So yeah, it helps us accelerate and do things a lot quicker, but I think you still need those expertise within the team.
Yeah, Mary was talking about the acting as function, particularly if you don't have those skills. But I think that's Andy. Okay, we've got some good questions coming in now. So from our mate Tom Saunders, who's actually got 2 questions. Do you think the sprint framework biases towards oversimplifying complex, not complicated, problems or opportunities? How do you avoid that?
It does run that risk, clearly, because you're trying to fit something into, you're deliberately time boxing, and every time you time box something, you're making an arbitrary decision about how big that thing can be, right? Because it needs to fit 7 hours. The way around it is by having the frequent check-ins, right? It's the fact that you've got your morning, midday, end of day work, and then the fact that you're experimenting on stuff afterwards. It's also the fact that the sprint isn't a single full stop in the world. It's a continual string, or it should be a line of work that's moving you forward. So you can build on whether it's complexity, in the following sprints and moving us forwards.
And to that point as well, how would you respond to team members and stakeholders calling for much longer research to explore the problem or opportunity?
Tom's favorite topic. Research is one of the most valuable activities that any of us can be doing, right? Talking to real humans and making sure whether that's using quant or qual metrics, that we're measuring how people are responding to things, observing how they're using things, understanding the motivations of the job that somebody might have, the outcome they're looking for. Those are all really important things. This isn't a contradiction to that. This is a complement to that, right? This is helping us have something that we can measure that helps move us forwards. It also stops us, though, falling into that analysis paralysis. I think one of the problems I've certainly experienced doing research in the past is that you've got potentially 5 very valid responses to the artifact that people are looking at, whether that's, a shop or a physical product or a digital product. The only way to get around that is to try and move the conversation forwards by introducing a new piece of stimulus, whether that's adding to the product or whether it's adding a service that complements it, to try and understand which of the 5, valid potentially directions looks to be the most interesting one. So yeah, complement helps us move forwards, learning by doing, all of those pieces. Andy, sorry, any builds on that?
No, I think that's it. It's about, like you say, it's about having something tangible and creating that and using that as part of the process. So no, I think you do a great job there.
Cool. So David at Cast, and Tom was happy with that one, well done. David at Cast has said that he loves the single day process, but if they have less time to come together as a team, which aspects of the sprint process might be suited to asynchronous collaboration? Good stuff they can capture beforehand, afterwards, via a whiteboard or collaboration tools.
Interesting question. I suppose it depends slightly on the outcome they're looking for in that scenario. The lightning decision jam, in terms of unpacking the challenge, I think unpacking challenges tends to be, there's that made up quote about, I think it's George Washington, it's always assigned to a different president, but that if they were trying to cut down a tree or something, they'd spend 9 hours sharpening the axe and only 10 minutes trying to cut down the tree or something daft. Einstein has a similar quote assigned to him. If you think about the problem for 10 months and then spend a day trying to solve the problem, I suppose it's a similar thing in so much as unpacking the challenge is always the most valuable part of any innovation process. So that lightning decision jam, where you're bringing the people who wear the client hat and trying to move them forwards quickly through that process of getting them to jot down their challenges, voting on them, how might we's, that feels like, you know, if there's only one bit that you can do synchronously, that's the bit that needs to happen synchronously. And I don't know how you feel about that, because just
No, completely. That's no. I think you're right. That's the bit that we need everyone together to be able to do that. Whereas the check-in, for example, you could provide that asynchronously, and also the end feedback as well in terms of the demo. You could do that in different ways. But I think that first bit definitely needs to be all of us together.
Great. Sounds like it comes back to the good old 80-20 rule again. Always pops up. And we have a question from Vicky. How do you confidently factor in inaccuracies and potential bias caused by lack of consideration for accessibility and inclusivity?
I think this is similar to Tom, the response to Tom's question around the one-day sprint isn't a single event in time where you've arrived at the end product. So RNIB as an example, we wouldn't have had any, we had something valuable at the end of day one in so much as we validated that we could get all of their internal knowledge into a vector database. But that wasn't the end of the process, right? And making sure that we handle that challenge of whether it's inaccuracies, whether it's inaccessibility, those need to be looped into their own individual sprint or sprints to solve them and validate that we are helping them. I mean, I think particularly on the point of accessibility, and this is particularly true of physical products, but is also true of digital products, accessibility is multifaceted. There isn't a single answer to, it's not just about using a contrast checker to see that, you validate your colors. There is a whole range of different ways that people can be excluded from objects, and quite often, or from assets, and quite often they compete with one another. So in the physical world, you might make something more ergonomic, but by making it more ergonomic, it's heavier, which means that someone who is older might struggle to use it for a long period of time. Those need to come into their own sprints so that you can properly work on them. There's no magic bullet on that one.
Brilliant. And you are the king of metaphors and analogies as well, aren't you? I hope that answered your question, Vicky, as well. And that is all of the questions. And Vicky likes an analogy too, so that's good. If you do think of any more, as I say, I'll be sending you a follow-up email, so just give me a shout back, and I'm happy to ask Andy and Ed any other questions that you have. And thank you, Andy and Ed. I think that's all for today. So thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Bye.
We now need to do the weather chat as well as everyone's leaving.
Still sunny.
Still sunny, yeah.